there, my Attachment Theory in Action podcast listeners and viewers. I'm your host, Jenna Kelly, and I hope this interview finds you well wherever you are listening or watching today. And I am really excited, as always, to share this next conversation with you, where I get to sit down with Dr. Rana Pishva, who is a psychologist working in Canada. And we are keeping it real about this very important and delicate transition into parenthood. However that journey looks for a parent, whether it's their first child or they have multiple children, it is a transition that is a very vulnerable and tender time that often doesn't get talked about enough in these real ways and can often get very idealized. And so Dr. Rana just brings so much insight into this journey and the work that she's doing. She's going to share a case with you. She's going to share strategies with you. And she's just going to beautifully keep it real. So let me tell you a little bit more about her. She is trained as a psychologist and provides psychological services in English and French to children, adolescents, adults. And she offers those services to individuals and families and couples facing just a range of concerns: anxiety, depression, trauma, PTSD, childhood abuse, parenting difficulties, postpartum issues, attachment. She conducts mental health assessments, as well as parenting capacity assessments and custody and access assessments. Whatever type of intervention she's doing, she just really aims at supporting clients in developing adaptive coping strategies and more self-awareness and self-understanding. And she's been trained, in addition to her formal education, just various broad range of different interventions, such as circle of security and trauma-focused CBT and dyadic developmental therapy, Steinhauer's guidelines for assessing parent capacity, advanced issues in high conflict child custody cases, as well as various infant mental health and attachment trainings. She continues her professional development through consultation and supervision. She also provides supervision to clinicians and provides workshops. So we'll make sure her website's linked. Check out all the cool stuff she's doing and maybe even how you can learn from her or work with her, and enjoy our very wonderful conversation. Well, hello, Rana. Welcome. I am so excited to be in conversation with you today.
Me too. I am very excited. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. Let's give our listeners a little more background context of how our paths came to cross. You reached out to me with an email providing some feedback about an episode, and that led to some more just kind of thoughtful emails back and forth. And then we had a conversation. And now here you are.
I know. Yeah, I did not expect to be doing this when I had first written as sort of a long-time listener, but I'm really excited to be able to talk about what I'm doing and what I'm learning from the wonderful parents that I get to work with. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for our loyal listeners as yourself. And it's just a reminder to all our listeners that I love interacting with you. I love feedback. And also be careful, because you might end up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I have to admit, like, you responded within, like a day or two. And I was like, oh, wait, she responded. Like, that was kind of exciting because you kind of send it into the abyss, right? So thank you for taking the time to do that.
Yes, absolutely. So here we are, and I would love to invite more of you and your vulnerability into our conversation. And so could you please share with us an attachment memory that feels important to you and to your work?
Absolutely. One that feels particularly important both in my work and in my life as a parent is when I think back about my parents, both my mom and dad, they worked a lot. They did, like many other parents, did everything they could to give us a better life than they had. And because of that, we ended up not seeing them very often because they worked so much. And especially my dad, he would often leave the house before I was awake and come home when I was in bed. But when I started to swim competitively, he would be the one who, 3 times a week or so would take me to the pool deck at 5:30 in the morning. And so he woke me up, and I remember him waking me up so gently. he would place his hands, and I'm getting full in my chest thinking about it, but his hand on my back and just kind of gently rubbing my back to wake me up. And that is such a warm memory, especially since, as I said, sometimes I wouldn't see him a lot. And now I try to take that gentleness in my own parenting, that, if I walk into my 4-year-old's room and she's like, I don't want to go to school, to stay gentle and stay gentle with my clients as well when things get heated. So yeah, bringing that in is a memory that I try to keep.
Yes.
Ooh.
Thank you for that heartwarming memory. And it sounds like such a gentle transition into the day, too. And that's so fitting for the important transition that we're talking about today, which is the transition into parenting and the journey, the very unique journey that all parents take as they embark on parenting. And so, how is it that you came to focus on this parenting identity journey in your work? And also, can you give us a baseline of what is it? What do you mean when we say parenting identity?
Absolutely. So, starting with the first part of your question, realizing that, some work needed to be done in this area or to be explored was that, although I had been working as a psychologist with children and their parents and families for over a decade, or almost a decade, I should say, I'm sorry. It's only when I became a parent that I realized how I know so much about a C-section, but I had no idea what to expect around the emotional, relational toll that parenting is going to have. And all these prenatal classes and all the things to read just did not prepare me for that. And I came across some great books. Dr. Alexandra Sachs and Dr. Catherine Birndorf have What No One Tells You About Pregnancy, and Chelsea Conaboy's Mother Brain, that sort of validated this idea that moms and parents overall, they need support for that emotional and relational aspect of parenting. We need something more than, oh yeah, you'll be hormonal and, you'll have maybe the blues. And if you're anxious or sad, talk to your doctor. Like, we need more than that. So I started on a workshop in the community, and as well in some community organizations to work with parents, with either new parents or future parents, to reflect and prepare themselves as much as you can for that transition into parenting.
Yes, I think back to my own motherhood journey, being 19, and there was so much focus on, the physical aspects of pregnancy and the baby and how's the baby doing, and I don't remember getting any support, and also feeling pretty isolated as a young mom because the people around me weren't having babies yet, and of the emotional layers that come with the pregnancy journey, or however that journey is to parenthood. So I'm so glad that you're supporting families with their own journeys. And you mentioned Dr. Alexandra Sachs, which I listened to her TED Talk on this transition to parenthood. And I'm like, I feel like this should be mandatory listening and watching for every new parent. And it's like 7 minutes long, and it's like 7 minutes going to like blow your mind.
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
And she talks about this term matrescence. And I know you've also focused, that's one of the terms that aligns with this parenting identity journey. So tell us more about this term, and why is it that many of us have never heard of this word?
I love the term matrescence, and it is a term that means or describes the time of mother becoming, this transition in life. So we have terms that talk about different life periods: infancy, toddlerhood, adolescence, middle age, but nothing really that reflects that transition into becoming a mother, and I think into becoming a parent, not just a mother. And it reflects the psychological, physiological, emotional journey of becoming a parent. It's not just giving birth or baby arriving, right? And so it's a wonderful way to recognize the parent. And I really appreciate that you said, it's all about the baby, and asking the parents, how are you today? Instead of how's he sleeping, right? As to, the why we haven't heard of it, I feel like that could be a podcast in an episode in and of itself, like lack of interest, funding, attention, patriarchy. You can go wherever you want with that. But basically, we need space for parents, moms and parents to talk about their experiences in parenting and addressing the sort of cultural aspect of putting baby first. But that's probably another podcast, right? We need to celebrate more than the arrival of baby, but the arrival of mom and dad and all parents. Yeah.
Yes. And I think she talked about in her TED Talk that it was a term that came from anthropology, which I was, of course, leave it to anthropology to come
to answer it. Absolutely. Yeah. Dana Raphael, I believe. And now it's Orly Athan, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, at Columbia, who's doing a little bit more formalized research on the term, right? So it's exciting that it's happening. So
yeah. So let's talk more about this transition and especially how it impacts relationships. So as a parent becomes a new parent, everything about their identity shifts, including the closest relationships that they have, their partnerships, if they're in a partnership. So how does that impact the relationships and what supports do new parents need to better navigate those relationships?
Well, I think I can answer that by sort of talking a little bit about that parenting identity piece that I think starts a lot with the hopes, dreams, expectations, or worries that parents are going to have about what it's going to be like to be a parent, what their baby is going to be like, what the relationship between them and their loved ones is going to look like once baby arrives. And these expectations, hopes, fantasies, they begin before pregnancy or before starting an adoption process. It builds over life, over the relationships that we have. And, it might be something along the lines, I'm going to be calmer. My partner and I are going to reconnect. It's going to bring my family together. I'm going to have a best friend for life. I'm going to give them the experiences I never had, right? We're going to have this undeniable connection. All of these, hopes, fantasies that may not even be explicit, they're there in parents. And with a co-parent, whether you're still in a relationship or not, this huge change of parenting, around routines, chores, expectations, your body, intimate relationships and wants, all of that uncertainty, all of that change is exciting, but because it is a change, it also involves a loss. Something is no longer there. And no two parents are going to have the exact same history. When you have different histories, different attachment strategies, different expectations, then at some point there might be a misunderstanding, confusion, frustrations in the partnership because our expectations, our interpretations don't align, right? And that can be really painful. So I think I forgot sort of exactly what your question was, but it's, we're going to start at different places. We're going to develop our identity parenting differently. And at some point there might be a clash, right? So, yeah, I hope that answers it.
Yeah. And so that makes me want to do some more myth busting, because I know you've talked about that too, like the different misconceptions or unrealistic expectations, like you said, that we might put upon ourselves or that the larger culture might put on us about what this is supposed to look like. So let's break down some of those myths. What have you seen?
Right. I don't know what breaking them out is really hard, but making them explicit is possible. Very often hearing about that immediate love and connection with baby, and how in the midst of it all, sometimes it doesn't happen, or something happens differently, right? And that can be a big point of disappointment, especially if birth doesn't arrive in the way that was expected, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that also that sense of that tends to be a common expectation. That expectation of, oh, and I feel like that's advice that's given is, oh, you'll know what to do. That maternal instinct, right? That you're going to know what to do. And I have strong feelings about the notion of parental instinct that, you have this, you're a mom, you're going to know what to do. It's natural. It's going to be your instinct. And quite frankly, excuse my French, it's bull, because we're not supposed to know. Parenting is a skill. It's something you learn over time. You can't do it on your own. And this expectation that you're going to know what to do only sets people up to feel disappointment or guilt or not good enough, right? So I think that's a really big one. Like, how do I not know what to do?
Mm-hmm.
For all members of the family, sometimes those unrealistic expectations around that. The also the fact that there's only sort of one right way to parent in order to be a good parent, whatever that means. That's also, I think, a big myth. Or the vulnerability of asking for help and asking for help again and again. It's not because you asked for a night, some help at the beginning for a night shift that you can't do it again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the big ones. And yeah, that's
Yeah.
what
And I really resonate with the one about this maternal or paternal bliss that
uh-huh.
we or our culture, and I know there's not just one monolithic culture, but especially where I am immersed, the American culture, there's these, like you said, kind of unrealistic expectations that you're just going to know what to do and immediately fall in love with your baby, and it's going to just be pure bliss. And then when that doesn't happen, when we're sleep deprived and trying to figure out who I am as a parent, and I don't recognize my body anymore, and all of these things, then it's like, how is that supposed to be bliss? Not that there aren't moments of bliss and joy and love, and that our gut instinct, is helping us figure out what to do, but also it's messy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like one of the first things that happens when that bliss isn't there, or maybe it's not as constant, or just it's different, is, well, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with me?
Yes.
Right. And then let the, snowballing of worries and guilt begin for parents. And recoiling sometimes. I'm not talking about that, right? Absolutely. It can be a quite harsh reality sometimes to expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and let's add another layer on this, which is attachment, and how a parent's own primary attachment styles and attachment histories and stories impact their parenting identity journey.
Absolutely. Whenever I talk about attachment, I try as much as possible to talk about it as a strategy as opposed to a style. And I think right now there's, the pros and cons of all the wonderful information, but also misinformation out there that people come into the therapy space with about what attachment is. But I really try to help those that I work with to remember that, attachment is a way of relating, it's adaptive, and it's a strategy. So I try to use that language myself, and parents hear plenty about attachment between themselves and their child at different points in their lives, and how they should do everything they can for it to be, air quotes, secure, and the list, air quotes again, of things that they should be doing. And I like to bring to attention a parent's own attachment style. And I'm not going to pretend for a second that this is my idea. Of course, there's amazing researchers, pioneers who have brought this on, and that I sort of so grateful to have learned from them. But parenting is a relationship. And because of that, it's going to bring to surface things. And I like to talk about it as, it's like a familiar smell. You walk into a bakery and there's some fresh baked bread and oh my goodness, I feel like I'm at grandma's house. Or there's a cologne and oh my goodness, smells like dad. And that's going to bring up emotion. Our children are going to do things that are going to bring things up, and we might not always know what that is. So when, parents react to their child, when there's things in their parenting journey that is uncomfortable or painful, I think that we can use that as information about what is going on for them. And, a minute ago, we were talking about partnerships. Well, when two people don't have the same strategies, when they don't respond to conflict and threat the same way, there can be misunderstandings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I try to talk about these in terms of attachment wounds. And when these wounds are pressed upon, there's guilt, frustration, overcompensation, sadness that comes up. And often we end up not being the parent that we want to be. And because we're not calm, we're not as fully engaged, because our brain, our body is responding to something in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really confusing for parents. And part of what I try to do is to bring attention to that, for parents to focus on their own attachment.
Yes. I think awareness is so powerful because it is going to come up sometimes when we're aware of it, sometimes when we're not. And the more we can lean into learning about what's happening right now in this moment and maybe in our history as well, then the more we can get present in our parenting relationships. And it's hard to do that by ourselves. And I don't think the expectation should ever be that we do that by ourselves. But again, there's a lot, especially in the more American culture, that we're supposed to kind of have this all figured out. So I'm wondering about the different levels of support that you have learned about that have been helpful for parents as they walk this journey. What have you found is really helpful for them?
Right. I think that support can come from different places, of course. Some people find that type of support in their primary caregiver, or if they're working with a midwife. Sometimes there is a team of mental health professionals that can also work with them throughout this process. Of course, there's also their own family, depending on the relationships that they have, where they can learn about parenting and those family relationships if they learn a little bit more about each other. There are some wonderful resources and groups online. And one of the things that I think is wonderful is parents coming together and sharing with parenting groups in a non-judgmental space what they can do, or what they are going through, and normalizing that for each other. And I really want to sort of emphasize a non-judgmental part of it, of being open with that, right?
Yes, a place where parents can be unfiltered and accepted and acknowledged for this very normal journey. But it may not feel normal if you're aligning with this idealized journey that is often portrayed, right?
Absolutely. And if you haven't, had the chance to or developed ways to ask for help and reflect, right, then it can turn into a very isolating and scary experience when we internalize that blame, when things don't go the way they quote unquote should. And there's, I think, somewhat unprecedented pressure on parents to get it right. Parents have less societal support. We live further away from extended family. We have less and less extended family because we have fewer siblings. And we don't grow up around kids as much. So kids, parents become parents with less experience, less of that sort of basic knowledge. And there's so much pressure to get it right, follow all the rules, and bombarded with all of this information that is often very well-meaning, not always accurate. And the sort of the costs of not getting it right are seen as being really, really high. There's some shaming of parents as well about the choices that they make for parenting, whether it's in their community or social media. So all of that is quite a recipe for guilt. And there's a part of me that is quite reluctant to suggest the internet for support because it can be wonderful, but also really misleading. And it can be really, really, really hard to just decipher through that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I love that you're bringing more awareness to this. You're saying that parents need support among each other, among possibly professionals. What are some other strategies that you've offered parents? Maybe those more kind of concrete, here's some things you can do, because sometimes we just need that prescription too.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It's good to have a framework and work through it, flexibly. If I'm working with someone in the therapy room, then we start with where they are now, right? I know you've had a whole week since we've seen each other, but where are you at right now? And starting with that. And at the beginning of the work, I do sometimes do the adult attachment interview with them or some other relationship questionnaire to bring things to the surface, depending on where they are in their journey, really. But in the same way that in so many attachment-based interventions, we make implicit memories explicit, a huge part of the work is to make those expectations, attachment wounds, losses, gains that come from being a parent explicit. And so naming that hurt, naming those unmet needs, naming their impacts that they had, the grief of the things that they don't have. So that they can understand their identity and their journey. And so we do that through discussion, that exploration of those different parts of their experience. And a lot of it has to do, I encourage all of my clients, and I have a stack of journals in my office that if they don't get their own, I give them one for journaling. I really, really think it's a fantastic way to reflect and make things explicit with very little expectation on my part. The way that I present it is, it's a way to record what happened, but most importantly, what it's like or what it was like, and connect what we talk about with the real world. If today we talked about shame and you're out in the world and you feel that bring that back in and you can record it there. Or it could be, really just writing out train of thought. And so we discuss prompts, different questions that they can reflect on. And then another so the journaling is a really big piece. And another big part of the work is some visualization work and connecting with that child self that had those unmet needs or had those expectations around parenting. Speaking to that someone who may not be here or writing to them. And I do practice the Ideal Parent Protocol, the Brown and Elliott IPP, which I find really helpful, even if we tweak it a bit to really match their situation. Having clients visualize, imagine scenarios where there is an ideal parent figure that does meet their needs, that does provide that emotional support, security, that helps them feel seen, protected. Giving them that sensation, having them feel that safety can be really, really powerful. And sometimes I think I talk about it too much, but I feel like that brings on some self-compassion. And when you can do that, that opens up a lot of doors for change. So yeah, those are pretty concrete ways that we end up working.
Beautiful. I love the journal prompts and bringing in more compassion into this journey. Do you have a case that comes to mind, Rana, as you talk about some of these strategies that you've used?
Absolutely. I think one that is sort of represents a lot of the facets of the work is I was working with a mom who was a first-time mom. And when she had come in, what she was experiencing was, we often call it a maternal rage, right? There was so much anger and that she was experiencing in this time where she expected to be in love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first thing that we did was name and recognize that rage, that anger, and eventually getting to the sadness that was behind it. But I feel like I just jumped to the conclusion, but we thought about that anger, and she was asking herself, when she was angry, when she was up in the middle of the night with baby, she noticed that she was so angry at her mother. I'm like, why am I so mad at my mom right now? I am feeding my child. And by noting and reflecting and making connections, and she noticed that she felt that anger when she saw her mom playing with her little boy.
Mm.
And that anger was about my mom wasn't there for me. My mom isn't here for me now as a mom. Yet she is the most thoughtful, engaged grandmother. Why wasn't she there for me? And sort of, I feel that bubbles up so many hopes she had about, not only hopes she had when she was a kid about the mom that she wanted, but also about the mom that she wanted now that she was herself a mother, the type of support she hoped to have, right? And then the type of grandmother that she hoped. She was like, could she stop buying him toys and just make me a casserole? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So a lot of time just holding space for that anger. And so often when anger dissipates, sadness surfaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
And accepting the loss of a relationship. Um, when she was journaling of like, I'm never gonna have that mom, right? And not having the relationship she hoped to have with her mom. And an interesting part was she learned through a sibling that a little bit more about, is it her sibling, her aunt? Now I can't remember, but she heard about her mother's personal history and some of the losses her mom had. And, having some compassion for her mom and what her mom could do when she became a mom. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And having compassion for her mom, giving space for some forgiveness. So, okay, I she didn't hit the mark with me. She was hurt too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we continue to this day work on her building, fostering a relationship with her mother, communicating things with her mother. She never said in person, but in letters and in conversation, but fostering a relationship with her mother on her own terms. So boundaries around what she shares about visits, about what she can tolerate with her mom, right? And that's ongoing because you're always going to be a daughter and you're always going to be a mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's been a case that has been really wholesome in those ways, and in progression. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That was such a rich example of all of these layers that come with this parenting identity journey and what comes up when a new parent is relating to their new baby, that a lot of loss can be part of that process as we're also simultaneously grieving for the things that maybe we didn't receive or that
Mhm.
seeing that maybe your mom didn't get it as right as she could have with you, but now she's this different grandma, as can often
Mhm.
happen, and what that brings up. And so I'm so glad that this mom had you to walk
Yeah,
her
it's
through this
wonderful to work
this
with her.
journey,
Yeah.
especially as these feelings of anger are coming up. And it also makes me wonder how many parents want to just kind of push this stuff under the rug because they're already in survival mode. And now, like, here it is. I'm looking at my past. I'm looking at the future. I'm trying to be present. And
Right.
so, there might be times to survive where we can't be with all of those emotions. But also, we can't lose sight of where you said this mom is now, and that she's offering much more compassion to her own mother, and she's grieved the loss that she had in her relationship with her mother. So this is going to help her show up in a way that is much different for this child of hers.
Yeah.
And that is really going to increase the chances that they have, I'm sure, with the kind of work you just described, a really beautiful attachment relationship with her child.
Absolutely. It makes space for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Jenna, I absolutely love what you said about being in survival mode, because I often talk about how we're working on two timelines. We're working on the timeline of you lacking sleep, being exhausted, trying to figure out what your child needs, and you making sense of what happened to you in the past, right? All of this work is happening while you're trying to keep at least one child alive. Like there could be other ones around too.
Right.
So it's really demanding work, and it's ongoing because you know the child is always there and the needs are going to change. So the needs of that child and that relationship with her own mother is going to change when her child is older or when her second comes along, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think one of the things people often hope for or expect is that, okay, like I want to get over this. And how do I move on? It's like, well, you kind of don't.
Mm-hmm.
You make sense of it, and then it comes with you, and it's going to change. You might have to revisit it, and that's okay. But every time you revisit it, you'll have a better sense of what you're doing. It'll be a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, even with parents of adult children, there's clashes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that happens. It's ongoing.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I love that this mom had you and that she was able to experience this rage and this sadness without it being pathologized.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, you were able to hold it and kind of walk her through the different levels of understanding that she needed to process through some of that. So that makes me wonder, how do new parents know when they need help and what kind of help that they need?
Absolutely. Parenting is going to be hard no matter what. At some point, something you're not going to know what is going on. And so telling parents or having them to expect anything different is going to set them up for challenges. And that distress might be there. But when that distress is consistent, when persistent, when it gets in the way of someone being the parent they want to be, when they are not doing not what they think they should do, but what they would like to do because the sadness is so overwhelming, they can't smile to their baby, or the anxiety is so big that they're terrified to go outside with their baby. So when it gets in the way of those things, trust yourself and ask for help. And the type of help, you know what? Talk to whoever you are meeting and is willing to listen. If you are meeting your midwife, talk to them. If you are meeting, here in Ontario, we do a hearing test at 2 months, or within the first 30 days. I don't remember. And that is the professional you're seeing. Talk to them. Talk to your primary provider, whoever, because that is, if someone that increases your chances of someone hearing you and then either providing you with the help or directing you to the help.
Mm-hmm.
And talk to people, to whoever will listen, and someone will. Right.
Yes.
Mhm.
So tell us more about your work and where parents can find you.
Absolutely. So I'm in private practice in Ottawa, Canada. I'm a psychologist here. I am not online a lot, but my practice email and website, I'll provide them to you, and I think you can put them in the notes. And so
Or
the work that I do sort of is in private practice. I also do some workshops, working with the Canadian Perinatal Mental Health Organization, and working in doing some trainings there, and with some community organizations in Ottawa as well. So that's where a lot of my work is done. But I can also be found on the Postpartum International website, which has fantastic resources as well for parents. Um, so those are the main ways that I can be found.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we will be sure to link that. And I'm glad you mentioned another resource. Are there any other resources or websites or things that are available to new parents?
Hmm. Well, here in Ontario, we've got Perinatal Wellbeing Ontario, or the Provincial Council for Maternal and Child Health that is available. Postpartum International is obviously international and has resources that helps connect around the world, where people can get that support as well. Or, if they can't find anything locally, the closest to them, right? So they're so wide reaching, would be a great place for them to start.
Yes, and I think there's so much more that's available online now too, whether that's a
Mhm.
support group. Fussy Baby Network is one
Mm,
here in the States that's great, that has
yeah.
a phone number that new parents can call.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so, and I'm sure there's so many rabbit holes that people can go down to get support.
Yeah.
But we'll make sure to link some of the important ones that we mentioned here today as a place to start.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. That's great.
So, Rana, to end us off, as much as I hate to wrap up,
Mhm.
what do you envision for new parents as they walk their journey?
Mhm. Well, what I would like to happen is that the notion of matrescence and the parenting identity, parenting journey becomes part of the prenatal education preparation that's done. Just as much as we learn about the various complications, helping parents, just planting a few seeds for self reflection and for the village that they're going to have around us, around them for help as well, and preparing them emotionally, as well as the same ways we try to do it physically. So having people discuss that and seeing that as an important aspect of that, and supporting parents in that way. And it sounds silly, but something that I think would have a huge impact. And we are fortunate in Canada, there is paid parental leave, but offering parents time to be with their children with paid leave for moms and dads would be such a huge relief for parents. And so making those decisions that would help there as well would be the big things, I think.
100%. I join you in that
Yeah.
vision. I think it's all the way down to that individual level of what do new parents need and supporting that identity journey, as well as this macro level of policy,
Yes.
legislation. And if we look at other cultures that provide more support and pay time off and things like home visit, universal home visiting and those kinds of things, I think we're going to reduce so much stigma and isolation and increase secure attachment for parents and their children. So, yes, what a beautiful note to end us on. You're
Awesome.
doing such important work, Rena, and it was a true honor to be in conversation with you today. And I can't wait for our paths to cross again.
I
So,
can't wait either. Thank you so much for the trust and opportunity to chat with you. And it I, as a listener, I've really enjoyed the work and the direction that you've taken with the podcast. So,
Oh, thank you so much, Jenna. Well, take good care.